The cold was already in my bones when I stepped off the snowcat, a cold that bit sharper than any winter I'd ever known. This wasn't just sub-zero, it was a deep, ancient chill that seemed to seep from the earth itself. Volcano winter, they called it, another charming reminder of how thoroughly we'd screwed things up back on the surface. My breath plumed out, instantly freezing into a fine mist against the biting wind. The geothermal power hub, a squat, brutalist structure of reinforced concrete and steel, stood stark against the gray, perpetual twilight of the peaks. A final flicker of hope for the domed cities, or so they kept telling us. My job was to make sure it kept flickering. I hauled my kit bag through the airlock, the heavy steel doors hissing shut behind me. The sound echoed for a moment, then nothing. Just the low hum of the ventilation system, a constant, dull thrumming that always rode the edge of hearing. Even inside, the air was sharp, thinner than it should be, and the metallic tang of ozone mixed with something else. Something earthy and deep, like wet rock. My first stop was control. It was just as I remembered it from the schematics, but colder, much colder. The internal heating system was supposed to keep this place at a steady 22 degrees Celsius, but I could see my own breath. Not as thick as outside, but still enough to warrant a shiver. I pulled my thermal gloves back on, my fingers already stiff. I dropped my bag beside the main console, the worn plastic of the buttons feeling slick under my touch. The main display glowed a familiar icy blue, showing lines of data I knew by heart, except for one: the core temperature. The deep, deep core where the geothermal drills tapped into the magma, it read 3 degrees lower than normal. Not a lot, I thought, but enough to trigger an alert back at Central. Funny, I hadn't gotten any. Another sensor glitch, huh? I mumbled to myself, my voice flat in the cavernous room. This weather really puts everything to the test. I leaned in, tapping the screen lightly with a gloved finger. It didn't budge, just held that number, unwavering. Annoying, but probably nothing. Just some ice crystals jamming a readout somewhere. That's what I told myself. It had to be. I was reaching for my tablet to cross-reference the sensor data when the satellite phone on the desk beside me rang. I froze. My hand jerked back. The sound was so sudden, so utterly out of place, it felt like a punch to the gut. Nobody could call this deep underground, not this far out, not with the interference the volcanic activity caused. We had strictly scheduled comms windows, once a week if we were lucky. That phone should never ring unless someone was physically dialing from the same network, which was impossible. I stared at it, the shrill, mechanical ringing cutting through the hum of the ventilation. It rang again, then a third time. My heart was up in my throat. I hesitated, then slowly, carefully reached out. My fingers brushed the cold plastic. I picked it up. Static. Just a harsh, violent hiss that scraped against my eardrums. I frowned, pressing the phone harder against my ear. Through the static, I heard it. A whisper. Faint, distant, like it was coming from the bottom of a deep, dark tunnel. It was indistinct. A low, sibilant sound, like air escaping a cracked pipe. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely a whisper, a strange echo of my earlier thought. No answer, just the whisper and the static. I lowered the phone, my hand shaking slightly. Must be interference, I told myself, trying to calm the frantic beat in my chest. The cold, everything could be affected. I put the phone back on its cradle. Then, just as I let go, it happened. From the phone's speaker, a low, distorted voice echoed back to me. Muted, slowed down, dripping with something I couldn't quite define. It repeated my own thoughts, the very words I'd just mumbled. This weather really puts everything to the test. It dragged each syllable out, warping it into something ugly, something profoundly wrong. What the hell? I stepped back, my hand instinctively reaching for the phone again, then snatching it away. What was that? My breath hitched. It had to be a malfunction. A loop, maybe. A recording of some kind. Yeah, that was it. Just a really specific, really creepy malfunction. With this cold, I reasoned, anything could be affected. Anything. I needed to check the turbine room, secondary relay. The system had been flagging an error there since yesterday. A persistent, annoying red light on my tablet. Maybe some loose wiring. Focus on the logical. I grabbed my toolkit and headed out, the heavy blast door thudding shut behind me. The corridor stretched before me, a long, sterile tunnel of gray metal and flickering fluorescent lights. The kind of place that always feels too long, too empty. I'd walked this corridor 100 times. I knew every dent in the panels, every slightly skewed light fixture. But as I walked, the lights seemed to flicker more erratically than usual. One moment, a harsh white glow, the next, a deep, unsettling orange. And then I saw it, a shadow. Tall, impossibly thin, it seemed to detach itself from the far wall, at the very end of the corridor, and shimmer out of sight, just for a heartbeat. I stopped dead. My blood ran colder than the air. I whipped my head around, shining my headlamp down the empty passage. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just the dull gray walls stretching into the gloom. "Just tired, Sarah," I muttered, my voice thin. "Long trip, eyes playing tricks." I started walking again, faster this time. My boots clicked on the metal floor, the sound sharp and alien in the sudden silence. But as I took a few steps, then a few more, a prickle of unease started to crawl up my neck. The corridor, it felt longer. It just kept going. The exit, that heavy containment door, seemed to recede with every stride I took. Like the walls themselves were breathing, expanding, stretching the distance between me and where I wanted to be. Damn it, how long have I been walking? I pulled out my handheld flashlight, sweeping its beam wildly down the corridor. No, no way. I stopped again, my breath coming in ragged gasps. It can't be. My eyes darted from the ceiling to the floor, from one side to the other. Just metal, just a corridor. Or is it my eyes? I forced myself to walk again, focusing on the rhythmic click of my boots, trying to ignore the creeping certainty that the end of the hall was always just as far away. This was just perception. My mind was playing games. It had to be. Eventually, somehow, I reached the turbine auxiliary room. The heavy metal door, which I always sealed with the coated lock, was ajar. Just a crack. A thread of fear, cold and thin, unwound itself in my gut. Who was here? Nobody else was supposed to be here. My team had evacuated weeks ago, before the winter truly settled in. I pushed the door open, the sound of grinding metal loud enough to make me jump. The air inside was dense with the smell of ozone, but also something else, something cloying and sweet, like old blood mixed with dust. The fluorescent lights inside were flickering, making the massive, silent turbine cast long, dancing shadows. My gaze fell on the workbench. It was tidy, almost surgically so. The power cables that should have been connected to the auxiliary turbine were neatly detached, coiled like sleeping snakes. But instead of the usual tools I expected to see, there was something else. A lighter. An old, beaten-up Zippo. It lay there, perfectly centered on the dusty surface, its polished chrome glinting under the stuttering light. Engraved on its side, in a crude, almost childish script, was a single letter, J. "You've got to be kidding me." My voice was barely a whisper. "Who's been in here? That door is always locked." I stared at the lighter. No one on my team had a Zippo. Definitely not one with a J on it. I picked it up. It was cold, so cold, it felt like ice in my palm. A shiver, colder than the air, traced a path up my spine. Then, just for a split second, an image flashed in my mind. Not a memory, not really. More like something forced into my head. A man. His face was blurred, indistinct, but he was smiling. That smile, it was wide, too wide, utterly wrong. And in his hand, he had that exact lighter. My breath caught in my throat. I looked down at the lighter in my hand. My eyes widened. The letter J was gone, vanished. In its place, etched into the chrome with an impossible flourish, was an elegant, swirling capital S. My initial. My own initial. The lighter in my hand was now undeniably mine. No, no way. The words caught in my throat. My mind reeled, grasping for a logical explanation. A faulty memory? Did I bring it? No, I never used a lighter.